In today's video, we're talking about Pluto lines in astrocartography. If you're unfamiliar with astrocartography, I'll link my What is Astrocartography or Astrocartography 101 explained video at the top somewhere for you to check out. But a brief definition would be astrocartography is a sector of relocation astrology where it's a map overlay that is showing you the trajectory of all the planets at the minute you were born. So these lines can be activated similar to your astrological placements in a birth chart, where when you go to these places, you'll feel different energies. I'll also link my blog below that goes into a deeper explanation as to what astrocartography is. Now, if you're already familiar with astrocartography, then let's get into it. So we're talking about the big bad wolf, quote unquote, Pluto lines. Now, I recently wrote a blog post about this explaining how Pluto lines aren't the big bad wolf. And that is because I've had several clients come to me to say, sorry, that's Ted. That's my golden doodle. He doesn't think Pluto lines are the big bad wolf either. But anyways, so I've had several clients come to me afraid to visit their Pluto lines, to move within the radius of their Pluto lines, just really, really scared to even interact with this energy at all, based on Reddit posts, based on TikToks that they've seen, just based on a bunch of negative experience that really... It's a bunch of negative experiences on the internet about these lines, but there's no actual context. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, first of all, I want to say that I'm not taking away from anyone's experience, because Pluto is heavier energy. It is one of the malefics. It is harder to work with. But I'm saying no actual context, as in we don't have the birth chart in most cases. We don't have the relocated chart. We don't even have timing, because timing is also a part of astrocartography, as far as when you get into the progressions or the transits, or even cyclocartography, which is a combination of both. And that is another overlay when you animate the map. So all of these things usually aren't provided in these recounts of these negative experiences on a Pluto line. However, when you're just trying to get information on whether or not you should visit this place or go to this place, obviously, you're not an astrocartographer, so you wouldn't know that. But that is why I'm creating today's video. So I just want to talk about how they're not bad. So Pluto, if you're unaware of Pluto or unfamiliar with Pluto's energy, Pluto is the planet of death, rebirth, transformation, regeneration. It rules, obviously death. It rules transcendence. It rules our sexual organs. It rules the underworld, think like Hades as far as mythology. So all of these things, but these can be heavier energies, and these can be also a portal of transformation. It just depends on how you look at it. So I'll break down each Pluto line and what you may experience during that time. But the biggest emphasis that I want to create, or I want you guys to understand, is that most of the time within astrocartography period, you are usually intuitively drawn to lines before you even know what astrocartography is. So most of the time, people are drawn to these lines because your soul is already seeking change. Whether you want to admit that or not is on you. You may be subconsciously seeking change or consciously seeking change, but most of the time you are. And I'm not talking like Uranus type of change. Like Uranus lines you can go to if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling in a rut and you just want to switch it up and you just want to get back to you kind of energy. I'm not talking about that type of change. I'm talking about deep, like shadow work, like I'm ready to look at the demons in my closet kind of change. I'm talking about inner alchemy. I'm talking about transformation. And usually when you're talking about Pluto, psychological factors come up because it is a big play on your psyche. Pluto is a generational planet. It's not a personal planet. And what that means is it's way out there. So it's going to be further out. It's going to be less personal, like your moon, Mercury, Sun, Venus. Those kind of planets are more personal. So when you think about generational planets, that means that it impacts your whole generation. So you and everyone in your age group normally has Pluto in the same sign, but obviously the house is going to be different depending on where you were born. So for example, for me, I'm 28. So I have Pluto in Sagittarius, which This whole video could be biased because out of all of the signs, my generation doesn't take things seriously, as in like Pluto can be a little bit more playful and a little bit more lighthearted, a little more lighthearted in the sign of Sagittarius versus other signs like Scorpio, Virgo, Libra, and everything that came before us. But I'll talk more about that in a second. So now I'm just going to give you each line breakdown so you can get a little better understanding of what I mean. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the ascendant line. This is all about you. It's going to be an emphasis on about you on this line. So this is the version of you that you've kept way back in the back of your mind. Like those aspects of you where it's like, I could take it there, but normally I don't. Like those moments where you kind of keep your cool, or in my blog, I like to call it like, this is your villain arc, babe. Like this is when you know what, like I'm going to let her out. I'm going to let my she-wolf out and she's going to show you what I'm really about. That is the energy of a Pluto ascendant line. Now, this isn't all negative. I know I'm saying it like a big bad wolf again, but this isn't negative per se, but this is just to say that you might have aspects of yourself that you haven't been acknowledging, and they may come up along this line. Now, one of the things another astrologer brought to my attention as far as my thesis on Pluto lines is the fact that I had a heavy emphasis on the psychological matters of Pluto, but not the physical. Physical things can happen on Pluto lines. Physical danger can happen on Pluto lines. It's not guaranteed. And again, this energy is going to manifest for everyone differently. I'm always going to emphasize the fact that with any astrocartography line, whether it's a benefic or a malefic line, your aspects in your birth chart truly matter. Your relocated chart matters, and timing also matters. So I will say that physical danger can happen, and with it being your ascendant line, it could be somehow you're in physical danger. But from my experience, as well as previous clients, I've noticed that even if physical danger arises, it's normally going to trigger some type of psychological activity within you, or is going to trigger an aspect of you that you would then process and in the form of like inner alchemy, as I was saying. So it's like outside trauma that triggers internal trauma. It was something that may have been there. That's the spark. Now it's time to look into it. It's time to dig into it. Things like that. But this is the place where you are never going to be the same. You may notice that you get more responsibilities or more power here, because Pluto is all about power. If you've been manipulating others and you try to do this here, any type of manipulation, especially on the Pluto line, is going to come to light. The only other line I will be mindful of that is a sun line, because the sun brings everything to light. So, don't be doing shady stuff on the sun line, but that's for another video. So with Pluto lines, you want to make sure that your intentions are pure, but this is really where you're going to notice an emphasis on your personal autonomy. Like you realize that you can stand on your own. You do have the power, and you are capable of everything that you set your mind to when you get on this Pluto line. But whatever you've been running from internally, whatever you haven't had the courage to face, or aspects of yourself that you are, shying away from, that will definitely surface and come up along this line. Okay, moving on to your Pluto IC line, which is going to be near your third or fourth house. Okay, so this is like the root of your chart. That's what the IC is. And then directly opposed is the MC, but we'll get there later. So the IC, this is connection to your roots. This is connection to your ancestry. This is connections to the people of the land with any type of IC line. But this is going deeper. This is childhood trauma may come up. What limiting beliefs have you been carrying? What system or structure that was set up in your childhood or taught to you in your childhood? And you're still operating like that as an adult today. Like your family may have done certain things some way, and unconsciously, you're still running that same program. Unconsciously, you're still behaving that way. You might be put in situations or circumstances that make you face that realization, or it's just brought to your attention in a whole new way. And the same thing with the ascendant line. Let me just go back there real quick. Some of those traits that I talk about that may come up, you may not even notice them. You just may have someone else saying like, Why are you acting like that? Or you've never done that before. Like somebody else could bring it to your attention if it's like unconscious, or you could already notice it within yourself if you have a higher self-awareness. And going back to the IC line, so this is all about your childhood. This could even be, it doesn't have to be your family. It could be like something that happened in your hometown where that is brought to the surface, or just some type of experience from just way back when. This is adolescence, childhood, or just earlier on in your life. Also, you could have a past life connection on Pluto IC lines. Sometimes past life connections do come through. You may be drawn to past life regressions or, karmic astrology. Anything like that could come up on a Pluto IC line, so keep that in mind. Or you could just feel really connected to the land, the history, and feel like you have a past life connection to one of the places that touches your Pluto IC line. Next, we're going to talk about the Pluto descendant line. So this is all about your perspective as far as like how you show up with the other person or how you're interacting with other people. So any type of relationship you have, whether that's, familial, romantic, platonic, whatever the case may be, there is going to be work here, okay? If you move here and you're married, or if you have a family, just know that the everyday maintenance that's required for healthy relationships are going to be put to the test along this line. And what do I mean by that? I just mean that like the daily little habits or the habits that you sweep under the rug that you ignore, that might come up. Like, why are you smacking so hard? Or why did you talk so loud? Or all those little things that just kind of annoy you, but you're just like, it's fine. Like, that's my pet peeve, but I love them. Not so much on this line. Your compatibility will really be tested along this line as far as romantic, really any relationship, because we all have compatibility, whether it's romantic or platonic. So your compatibilities will be tested along this line. It's really going to be, I choose to have these people in my life, not, they've always been there. They're always going to be there kind of energy. It's going to be put to the test on this Pluto descendant line. Also, keep in mind how you interact with others as far as work, co-workers, anything like that. That can also be tested along that line because it's how you're interacting with other people. If you may notice that people start to tell you, you're just being kind of controlling or you're being manipulative. Keep that in mind because, again, no manipulation on it's not going to go well for you. It might go well. Even if you think you're getting away with it, you probably aren't. So be mindful of how you talk to people. Be mindful of how you treat people. And notice if someone is trying to do that to you and bring that to light and set that boundary because you're there to transmute that energy, okay? And then lastly, let's talk about the Pluto MC line. So this is the height of your chart. This is heavily involved with your career, your legacy, your social standing. So here you really want to get to work and you're probably going to be motivated to work very, very hard. You might be put in high places or you might meet the perfect connections, like high profile people that really can get you from point A to point B or just higher status, whether that's work, business, career, whatever the case may be. You're not going to be the same here. You're going to elevate. Again, every Pluto line is a powerful place to be. However, it's all about how you work with the energy. Now here, you're probably not going to want to do business the same. So this is the CEO. This is your inner CEO stepping up, being on center stage. But this is not the one that's just kissing butt, nose browning just to get its foot in the door, or vice versa, blackmailing people to get to where you're going. If that's how you built your business or career, it could all come crumbling down along this line. But this is more so for people who, now they have power, now they have status, their hard work has paid off. Now, what are you going to do with it is a challenge along this line. It's going to be a real emphasis on, what does power mean to you and how do you wield it? How do you help others? How do you elevate yourself in a way that doesn't demean others? And how do you transmute the energy of power? So that was a quick breakdown of all the different Pluto line meanings. Now, before I end this video, I do want to emphasize that Pluto is a generational planet. So how I interpret Pluto's energy and how it manifests may be different for you, especially if you're in a different generation. This was another thing that I thought about as I had the discussion of what Pluto lines mean to different people and how people process external trauma versus internal trauma. Also, you have to look at the placement of your Pluto. If you have what's called an angular placement, meaning it's already on one of these angles, the ascendant, the IC, the descendant, or the MC, then you are probably more acquainted with Pluto's energy versus someone who does not have a placement that close to an angular house. So what does that mean? For example, my Pluto is in my fourth house. So my Pluto IC line is not that trauma and trigger filled for me because I kind of already experienced that natally. So if your Pluto is already in this area of any type of angular house, then that might be the same case for you. It may not be. Also, I've noticed that Scorpio risings or Scorpio moons, it's kind of the same energy where it's like Plutonian lines just don't really have that sucker punch of wounding or trauma or just physical danger as the next person. Again, I don't recommend living on these lines for an extended period of time because that energy may be hard to work with. Now, I have had a few clients where they have been on those lines. Many people also report feeling stuck on these lines. I think part of that stuckness is psychological, like heavily psychological, but obviously there are aspects that are physical stuckness. A lot of people are very connected to like their family there or their friends there, or their life is just kind of rooted in that place, and you pretty much would just have to let your old identity die in order to leave that place. But that, hate to say it, but that is Pluto energy. But again, I want to recognize that I am a bit biased in the fact that I do have an angular Pluto and my Pluto is in Sagittarius, but I also want to talk about that. I'm Pluto in Sagittarius, so it's like, of course, I have that more lighthearted energy as far as like tapping into Sagittarius. And Pluto was in Sagittarius for the shortest amount of time compared to every other sign. Now, before us, you have Pluto in Scorpio. So this is like they're in it, like they're in the underworld. They've seen just like the depths of how low things can be in a way, as energetically. But these are also very spiritual, like psychically attuned people. The AIDS outbreak happened during this time. This is when we start to see like the introduction of like totalitarian governments, where it's like governments are just locking everybody down kind of thing. Before that, you had Pluto in Libra. So that was around like the Watergate incident. And just, again, it was like trying to level out equal rights and things like that during that time, that Libra balance kind of energy. But these placements show up differently. Like these Pluto and Libra, again, is seeking that balance, but it could also, in seeking that balance, you could also have chaos. So it's literally like, you know, kind of teeter-tottering energy. Before that, you had Pluto in Virgo. So this is, you saw a lot of assassinations during this time, a lot of suspicions, a lot of conspiracies, a lot of mistrust, JFK, Martin Luther King, things like that. So it's like, how are all these, the thing about Pluto, again, generational planet. So think about what has happened in each generation and how that has shaped the psychological, again, these external events have created an impression psychologically within that generation. So when you think about the assassinations for Pluto and Virgo, boom, that obviously affects your psyche. When you think about the scandals and, you know, equal rights movements and things like that with Pluto and Libra, that impresses upon that generation's psyche. When you think about Pluto in Scorpio and the AIDS outbreak and, you know, the beginning of like the internet, like more like dial-up, but like the beginning of the internet and technology trying to get out there, that, how does that impress on your psyche? It's like Pluto and Scorpio, it really just talks about everything that Pluto is about, because it's Pluto rules Scorpio. So again, sexual organs and, you know, just this new age of like sexuality and things like that, and death and rebirth. Okay, moving on. Pluto and Sagittarius, we have the expansiveness, that Jupiter energy, that, okay, now the internet is taking off beyond dial-up. Now we have cell phones. Now we have computers. Now we have laptops. All these things take off in a whole new way. Now we have portable cell phones. Now we have the iPhone, all these things, vice versa, vice versa, vice versa. We have recently experienced Pluto in Capricorn, I mean, beyond '08, and then now we're even in Pluto in Aquarius. So as these children grow up, this is things that they will have to think about too in terms of astrocartography as far as visiting these lines, because everyone's psyche is different in that regard, or everyone has different impressions along the lines of Pluto. So, and you can do this with any other planets, any other generational planets. I mean, you could think about the same kind of vibes as far as like Neptune. What does spirituality mean to this generation versus the next, and things like that. So I just like to bring that take to the overall interpretation of these lines. And as we continue to interact with them and play around with them, we'll learn more and more about them. But I hope this helps. I hope this eases your mind a bit about visiting or even relocating to your Pluto line. I would highly recommend really diving deep into your chart if you are relocating to a Pluto line, but I'm not going to say that it's just going to be all hell breaks loose if you do. That is dependent on you, your timing, your chart, and just your intentions for even going there in the first place. So until next time, thank you for watching.